Hello everyone, welcome back to Code Pravah. In our last video, we built a cool music player as you can see it here. If you have not watched it yet, I recommend you to watch it. So today, we will be taking this music player app a step further. We will add a timeline for music tracks so that we can see the duration, current time and even seek through the tracks. So let's get started. So now I'm into my VS Code where I have this src directory, and inside this directory we have our app component, and inside this app component we are rendering this music player component if you remember it, and we were doing everything into this music player component. So today our goal is to add a timeline here so that we can see the duration, the current time, and we can seek into the current audio. So what I'm going to do, just after this track artist and just before the controls, I want to add a timeline here. I'll create one div with the class name of timeline, and inside this div I'll create one paragraph, and let's say I want to display the current time, and then I want to show my timeline. Let's say my timeline will be here and it's just a comment for now, and after the timeline I'll show the total duration for the audio file. Let's work on this timeline part. So what I'm going to do, I'll create another component and I'll name it as range slider, and I will quickly initialize this component, and then I'm going to import it right over here, and then I'll remove this comment and I'm going to render my range slider component. So let's work on this range slider component. So first I'll remove this div and I'll create a div with the class name of slider wrapper. Now we know that the slider will be a type of input because we have to provide input in order to seek the audio file. So I'm going to create one input and I'll provide a class name, let's say slider, and the type, I don't want text, I want a range type of input. So if I save it now, you can see it is showing here and it is closer to what we want actually. So we are going to use this slider component, which is range slider. So before moving on to the functionality part, I'm going into the CSS part, and if you remember, these were the CSS. And now we have to work on this slider CSS, and the first class on which we want to work is timeline, because this is the first entry point for this slider component. So I'll copy it and I'll paste it here as timeline. And because we want all these three elements inline, so I'll say display as flex, and then justify content to center, align items to center. And then I want to maintain some gap between these elements. So let's say 10 pixel, and I want to utilize the full width. So I'll say width of 100%, and it is taking into this controller button. So I'll say margin bottom, and let's say 1 rem for now. One more thing I can observe, the gap between this slider and the album name is too much. So I'll go into this track artist class and I'll say margin bottom only 1 rem, and it is looking fine now. Inside this timeline, I have two paragraphs, so I'll write some CSS for them as well, and I'll just change the font size to 12 pixels. Now let's go into a range slider component, and inside this component, the first class is slider wrapper. So let's copy this and I'll paste it here, and I'll say width of 100%. I want to utilize the full width, and the display I want as flex, which will inline the time and the slider component. The next important part is slider. I'll say cursor as pointer. Now we know that we need slider, but we don't want the default slider. We want a glassy kind of slider. So I'll say appearance as none, and then I'll set the height and width to 4 pixels and 100% respectively. So now you can see it is filling the whole width, and I want the border radius of, let's say, 50 pixels, which will make it rounded. Now I want to change the background color for this range slider. So I'll say background, and I'm going to use linear gradient property here, and towards right I'll say white color, and let's say 50%. We will change it very soon. Let's keep static for now. And the next part I want to be darker bluish color, and it will be again 50%. And if I save it, you can see the half of the slider is white and half is darker bluish, which is showing like half of the track has been reached. And if I move my slider till here, you can see it is looking fine but it is not being controlled because it is 50% and 50%, which is static for now, and we will change it very soon. The last property I want to add on this slider is transition, and I want to apply transition on background for, let's say, 0.3 seconds. And the next part on which we want to work is this thumb. We call it as a thumb, and the default color is blue, as you can see, which is rendering here, and we don't want this default color. So let's work on that. So I can select it by selecting the slider, and then there's a property WebKit slider thumb. And the first thing I want to say, I want to set the appearance as none. It means I don't want to use the default thumb. I want to create my own thumb. So I'll say the new thumb which I want to create should be having a height and width of 20 pixels, and it's not visible yet. So let's add border of 1 pixel solid, and I'll use the same color for this border as we were using into these icon buttons. So you can see it's visible. So let's add border radius of 50%. I want it to be circular, and then I want to set the background for this. So I'll say background, and I'll choose this background color. And because we are dealing into glassmorphic design, so I'll say backdrop filter, and I'll blur it by 1 pixel. And then I'll add some box shadow, let's say 0.08 pixels, and I'll choose the color same as background. Now if I take a look on this, it's looking fine for me. One more thing I want to add onto this thumb is hover effect. So I'll copy the selector from here, I'll paste it, and I'll add hover properties from here. So first thing I want to update is height. I want a height of 20 pixel and width of 32 pixel. And the border radius I want 6 pixel. Now if I hover on this, you can see it's working fine. Few more properties I want to update in case of hover. For example, let's say background. I want to change my background, and I'll just change the opacity from 0.1 to 0.25, and then I'll change the border, and in this case I'll change the opacity to 0.5, and similarly I'll change the box shadow and I'll change the opacity to 0.2. Now if I hover on this, you can see it is looking far better, but the changes are not very smooth. So what I'm going to do, I'll add a transition property here, and I'll say I want this property to be applicable on all of the properties, and let's say for 0.2 seconds the animation effect will be ease in out. So now if I hover on this, you can see it's working fine. If I hold it and if I slide it somewhere else, it's working perfectly fine, and if I leave it, it's changing back into the round shape. Fine, we are done with the CSS. Let's work on the functionality part. So I'll go into my range slider component, and I'll define this component as it will accept 3 properties, that is max, value, and on change. Because this is an input, so on change handler will be invoked whenever we will be sliding this thumb. So first thing I will set is the minimum value. The minimum value can be 0. The maximum value for this slider can be same as the max, which will be coming from its parent as a prop, and then the value I will assign as same value which is coming from prop, and whenever on change event will be invoked, I want to call the on change function which I am receiving from the prop. One more thing I would like to add here is the style for changing the background, which will be dynamic, because whenever I will be sliding this thumb, this white background should be changing accordingly. So I'll go into my app.css, and I'll cut this background which we just applied into this slider. I'll save it. I'll go back into my range slider, and inside my input element tag, I'm going to add one property, that is style, and I'll paste whatever the style I have copied. But one more thing I would like to do, I'll wrap this linear gradient into a backtick so that it can be converted into a string. And you can see the designs are back. It's working fine as it was working earlier. But 2 static properties, which is 50% and 50%, which is representing the progress, and we need the progress in terms of percentage. So I can simply remove this 50 from here, and I'm going to calculate this percentage dynamically based on the current value. So what I'll do, I'll multiply the value by 100 and I'll divide it with the max. So it will be converted into the percentage. And similarly, I'll copy it again from here, and I'll remove this 50 again from last, and I'll paste what I have copied. So let's go into music player component, and after these 2 states, I'll create 2 more states. The first one is current time, which will represent the current time of that current track. And the second state will be duration, which will represent the total duration for a given track. It means the length of audio file in terms of time. Now I'll create one function with the name of handle seek, and for now I'll keep this function as empty function, but later this function will be used to handle the seek events inside a track. And I'll go to range slider where I am rendering it, which can accept three properties: max, value and on change. So let's pass them one by one. The max value for any track will be the duration itself, because the maximum value for a slider will be up to the duration. And the value will be the current time, because this will represent the current time for the given track. And the last prop is on change, which I will be handling into the handle seek function. Now let's work on populating the data into these two states. Let's work on the duration part. So because we have audio component here, and if you remember, I told you in previous video that every audio file has some metadata, like what is the length, at what volume it is being played, and so on. So there is an event attached to each audio component which we can access with the name of onLoaded metadata, and this event contains the duration. So I can set my duration as event.target.duration. And if I replace this last time with the duration and let's save it, it's not being reflected. Let's reload the page and you can see it is providing the total number of seconds for this given track. And if I go to next, it is being loaded. We don't need to refresh it again and again. And the format in which it is showing the total time is not what we want. So I'm going to create one function here with the name of format time, which will accept a parameter of time. And you can put this function into a util file to make it more reusable, but I don't see any reusability for now, so I'll be writing it here only. And remember, the time is coming into the seconds, so I'm going to extract the minutes from this time, and that I can do using math.floor, and I can divide the time by 60, which will give me the total minutes. And then I want to convert this minute into string so that I can apply the padding into start. So I can use the pad start function of JavaScript, and it requires the maximum length. The maximum length I want to display is 2, and if the length of the string is less than 2, I want to add 0 in front of it. So let's save it. Similarly, let's extract the seconds from this time. So I'll say math.flow, and everything which is more than 60 has been covered into the minutes. So what I can do, I can use time ampersand 60, which will give me the remaining seconds which are not covered into minutes. So again, I'll convert it into a string and apply the padding into the start. And at last, I'll return the minutes and seconds into this format from this function. And now I'll go here where I want to render my duration, and I'll call this function format time, and I'll pass the duration here. So you can see now it's working fine for all the songs. Now let's work on this element which represents the current time. So there is another event into this audio element, that is time update, and that we can access using on time update. And it also gives the event. So what I want to do, I want to set my current time from here, and I can access the current time of the current song using event.target.current time. Now if I refresh the page and if I play the first song, let me mute it first. You can see this thing is working. This one is not working because still it's static. So let's replace it, and I'll say format time, and the current time I want to pass here. So you can see it's being updated, and the track is also moving forward because the song is being played. Let's stop it for now and let's work on the seek functionality, because if I move it somewhere else, it's not working, because now this range slider is a controlled component and we can only change its value by using the state which is current time. So let's work on this handle seek function which we are passing into this range slider, and the range slider is calling whenever any change is being detected. So I'll go back here, and handle seek will now receive an event, and this event will be coming from input element on change detection. So what I want to do, I want to change the current time for the given audio. So I can access the current audio using audio_ref.current, and there is a property that is current time which exists on this audio and I can set it to event.target.value, whatever coming from the range slider. And at the same time, I'll also set my current time to event.target.value. So now if I play it and if I use the seek functionality, it's working properly fine. Now let's play this song and see the whole functionality which is working fine or not. So you can see it's working perfectly fine as we wanted. So what you can do into the next step? In the next step, you can add a volume rocker here, maybe same slider component you can use for the volume, and you can add one speaker icon here, which can work as a button, and whenever you click on that, the audio will be muted. And of course, you can access the volume property on the audio ref, and similarly, there is a muted property onto the audio ref, which you can use for your purpose. I hope you enjoyed this video. So if you learned something new from this video, please give a like to this video, share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe Code Pravah, and thanks for watching.